So, the second attempt to explain what is the difference between reflective and formative measures, and to show you how you work with the formative and reflective measures with SmartPLS. The best way to show or to illustrate to my students the difference between the two approaches is to explain how you can measure wealth of a person or how you can measure whether the person is drunk. If you would like to know if the person is drunk, what would you do? You can observe the person and see how the person is walking, how the person is talking, how the person is focusing on something. Can he or she focus the gaze? Is he or she walking straight, or does he or she have problems with formulating words he cannot or she cannot speak clearly, and so on. Smell of alcohol can also be one of these indicators. The interesting thing is that these things are consequences of being drunk. If somebody is drunk, the person most likely will not be able to walk straight, to talk clearly, to focus, will have probably red eyes, you will have the alcohol smell, and so on. And the more of these items you collect, the better you measure, the more you are sure that you measure truly of whether the person is drunk or not. If you look at only one indicator, if somebody cannot walk straight, can happen that the person has some disabilities, or maybe something else happened, maybe an injury. So, but if somebody smells, if you have the smell of alcohol, it can be after the person has eaten a banana, drinking buttermilk, maybe eaten an apple, you will have a very similar smell. That's why focusing on only one indicator will be wrong. The more you collect, the better you measure this latent construct of being drunk that we cannot, as humanly, we cannot approach directly. The same with the wealth. You see what the person is wearing, what kind of car the person is driving, what kind of watches the person has, and so on. These are the consequences. If somebody is rich, most likely the watches would be, wristwatches would also be not the cheapest one, and the car will be not the oldest one, maybe also not the cheapest one, and the flat will be located close to city center and not somewhere in downtown, and so on. And to have these reflections, we have to have many of them. That's why in this event, this BIS, for instance, is measured with 7 different items, which should show that the person has really inhibition in her or his motivation. And this is the reflective measure, the indirect measure. We measure the consequence of something. And in this event, the arrows go from the latent construct to these items as if there is a latent state, being drunk or being wealthy, that is reflected. So it is the consequence is that the person has A, B, C, or D. And in this event, we say the rule of thumb is that you should have at least 3 items measuring this construct, otherwise you might be wrong. So the more the better. All these items, they need to be correlated, because if it's really about being drunk, then it will be problems with walking and talking and smelling and so on. So they will be all correlated. They're all consequences of the same issue. But we can also approach the state of being drunk directly. Actually, in this event, we need to know how much the person drank. For instance, how many glasses of wine or how many glasses of beer the person has drank. We need to know the strength, how much alcohol was there, because the beers are very different, the same as with wines. Some wines are much stronger than the other ones. And of course, if it is a strong wine, there will be fewer number of glasses needed to be drunk. We need to have something else which is not related, this one, like a body weight. We need to know how tall the person is, how big the person is, because the bigger the person, the more alcohol needs to be drunk to become in the state of being drunk. So if somebody with 45 kilograms drinks a beer, he or she might be probably very drunk. If somebody with 200 kilograms drinks a beer, he or she might not even notice that he or she drank a bottle of beer. So in this event, we have a lot of things that are not correlated, but measuring directly whether the person is drunk or whether the person is wealthy. To know whether the person is wealthy, we need to know how much money the person has on the account, how much money the person has in the pocket, how much real estate the person has, because you can have a lot of real estate, but doesn't mean that you have all the money on the account. These things may not be correlated at all. The person can prefer just the cash. That's why I don't have anything on the bank account, but a lot of money in the pocket. And in this event, we talk about the formative measure. We talk about something that predicts this variable. That's why in this event, the arrows should go in the opposite direction. That's why we go here and let's see, switch formative reflective. Now you see these arrows go directly to BIS skull, which is wrong in this event, but let's assume it is correct. And in this event, we talk not about the loadings, we talk about the weights. And these items actually should not be correlated, and the less they are correlated, the better. Because your weight should not be correlated with wine. The wine is strong or not strong independent of your weight. It is the fact that you, with your weight, has drunk so and so many glasses of wine. So this has a huge difference. And what is also important for the formative factors, that you need to have them all. So some of them could have a very low weight, some of them could have a high weight. Important is that you include all important predictors of the state. If you observe the person in a bar and count all the numbers of beers and all the numbers of wine the person drank, but you ignore the body weights, you may be completely wrong with your results. Because again, if somebody has only 45 kilograms and somebody has 200 kilograms, the effect of this being drunk will be huge. There will be a huge difference, even though they have drunk the same number of glasses of wine. In Amos, it is not possible, at least to the best of my knowledge, to calculate these formative effects, direct effects. In SmartPLS, it is possible, as you have seen. You just add items and you say that they are formatively related. Then you run the same model with the factor loadings and so on. But in this event, you ignore the Cron-Bus alpha and composite reliability. Because in this event, let's run this model. As if it is correct, it is wrong, but let's assume it is correct. And you have to go to construct validity, and this Cron-Bus alpha and composite reliability, they are wrong because they should not be correlated. Actually, you have to ignore them. What you have to look at, discriminant validity is not an issue at all. The problem is the variance inflation factor. They should be low, so the item should not covary, they should not explain the same variance with itself. And that is why if you have the formative model, you report the variance inflation factors. Now I go back to our model and now look at this one. We have first order reflective factor, we have the second order reflective factor, we have the third order formative factor. And SmartPLS, you can build any complexity of the model. You can have the even fourth and fifth order, which is very hard to explain, but theoretically it is possible. In the paper, we argue that these three dimensions are necessary and complete to measure this capability that we developed for this paper. That's why it was easy to show. Here we have the weight, the loadings, but here you see the small letter W, which is for the weight, and we show these other weights. And it can happen that one weight will be very low, like your body height or how tall you are, maybe have a very low weight for the state of being drunk, but it is absolutely necessary that you include it, otherwise the results might be completely wrong. And actually the rest runs absolutely the same way as I showed you before. So you run the model, you aggregate in the same way, so you go to this latent factors, you copy them. This will be aggregated weights, not aggregated loadings. You include them in the model, you repeat the model just with the formatively related constructs, you calculate it, and then you will see what the results are. The difference between formative and reflective factors is a very hard one. Many people don't think about it, but it is. And many things which were usually assumed to measure as reflective measures may be formative measures. I'll give you an example, a known one with dynamic capabilities. And we know that dynamic capabilities can be disaggregated into sensing, seizing, or reconfiguration. And most measures, they take the three dimensions as reflective measures. A kind of, if you want to have dynamic capability, you should have all three of them and it should be correlated. At the same time, for instance, Wilden and colleagues in 2014, and in one of the next papers, they argue that actually they are formative. So you cannot have one without, you can have sensing, but you cannot have seizing. It can happen that you have a lot of data that you collect, but you are just don't have the capacity to make a decision. So you can have sensing without seizing. They are not correlated, they should be treated as formative dimensions for the dynamic capability construct. And as you see, even for the scholars who work in this field for years, maybe dozens of years, they still sometimes do not differentiate between reflective, formative, while they should be differentiating between these two types of completely different measures. If you want to know more, read more on literature, difference between formative and reflective factors. The good thing, again, going back to our class or to this video tutorial, is that with a SmartPLS you can use formative and reflective factors in combination. You can use them separately, and this is the only tool that I know that allows you to calculate these formative factors, include them into a big structure equation model, and very often, more often than you think, you may deal with the formative factors. So I hope it was helpful, and I'll see you in the next video. If we find out what we should try to record the video about, we can make a next one. For now it is the end, but maybe new videos are going to come. Have a nice day. Bye bye.